thank you so much for joining. For those of you who are watching live and for those of you who are watching the replay, so happy you're here. We are back to answer more real estate questions. Hi, hello to everyone who's joining right now. Hi, how's your afternoon going? What day of the week is it? It's Friday. It is Friday. All the days are running together. Hi, hello to everyone who's joining. So happy to see you here. Happy Friday. Hello, Valerie, Sheila, Zoe, Nickel Mac, the Cheesecake Boutique, which sounds delicious every time I see that username. I want cheesecake. So Jonathan, hey, happy Friday. Shannon, hello to everybody who is joining. Valerie, it's so good to see you. Roy Works, hello, hi. All right, debt-free guys. Hey, debt-free guys are here. They are awesome. Check them out if you haven't yet. Amazing info on getting out of debt and on LGBTQ finance. Debt-free guys are amazing. Love them so much. Thank you all so much for joining. We are here today to answer 3 real estate questions. By the way, one thing I learned, sorry, tangent. Vanessa Van Edwards is a future guest on the Afford Anything podcast. I just talked to her a couple of days ago, and we're going to air her interview I don't even know when, 2 months maybe? But one of the things that she taught me, she was like, try saying a number and holding up the wrong number of fingers on your hand. It's mentally really difficult. So we're going to answer 3 questions. And if I try to be we're going to answer 3 questions, my brain explodes. 3 questions. No, can't do it. All right, we're going to answer 3 questions. How many fingers am I holding up? That's part of one of the things she taught me when it comes to how we communicate twice, once with our mouth and then once with our hands, which is why whenever I talk, I look like I'm trying to land a plane, because I'm just so expressive. So, Jonathan, you're joining the book club. That's awesome. So we launched a book club. If you want to join, the link is in the bio of Instagram. We launched this book club officially as of Wednesday, and our first book that we're reading this month is called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. So cool, Jonathan, I'm so glad you're joining. It's going to be so much fun. Okay, let's get to the questions. Question number 1 comes from Sam. And Sam says, one of the things I've been struggling with is having a home, a personal residence, versus an investment property. I'm 47 years old, and I've rented my whole life. I live in a high cost of living city, San Diego, and I don't own any real estate. And so he goes on, talks for a while. They goes on, talks for a while, and then ultimately the final question, the final paragraph, which I'll cut right to, is, I know your content is very focused on getting into investment real estate, but I was wondering if you had suggestions for folks like me who don't necessarily want investment real estate, but maybe think it's the only way to get into a home. So in Sam's case, they don't necessarily want to be a real estate investor, but they want to own real estate, and ideally they want to own a home for themselves at some point, and this seems like the only path. So one thing that is beautiful about house hacking is that house hacking is not just for real estate investors. House hacking is also a way that people who otherwise wouldn't be able to get a primary residence for themselves, maybe because they live in a very high cost of living area, as you do, house hacking is a way to actually make real estate, make a home for yourself, that primary residence, reachable. And when you house hack, you don't have to live with roommates, right? You actually, one thing that Sam says in their message is that having roommates is not something that's attractive to them, right? And so, which I get. And what's great about house hacking is that you can buy a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex, and you don't have roommates. You live in a building that has multiple units, and you rent out those other autonomous units, but you yourself live in your own home, your own autonomous unit with your own autonomous space, and the rent that you collect from the other units covers your personal mortgage payment. And what's great about house hacking is that you, if you're thinking about house hacking from the perspective of an investor, then you're really worried about like, what's the returns gonna be? What's my cap rate? Pardon me. And that can be kind of limiting, because then you're like stressed out about like, I can't find out, this is the cap rate that I want to reach and I can't find anything that reaches that cap rate, blah, blah, blah. When you're house hacking, if you're just buying a personal residence for yourself, you don't have to worry about any of that. Like, all you need to worry about is, do I personally want to live here? And can I collect enough rent from the other units that it would make this affordable for me? And as long as the answer to those two questions are yes, like the other units, they don't even have to cover every penny of your costs. If they cover enough costs such that you living there would be the equivalent of whatever you're paying in rent right now, your current living costs, heck, awesome. Now you have figured out a way to use house hacking to get yourself into real estate and to get yourself that first property. And to be perfectly honest, when I bought like my triplex in Atlanta, that was at a time in my life where I could not figure out how anyone could pay out of pocket for their own mortgage. Like, that just seemed so absurdly expensive. And so living in, in a situation where I had a multi-unit property as my first property, and that was what got me in the door. Like, that's amazing. So anyway, I can sing the glory of house hacking all day long, but you get it. House hacking as a way of getting a home for yourself. And that's it. One and done. You don't have to become a real estate investor. Just one and done. Use it to get a property for yourself, and then you're solid. And if you don't want to live in that property forever, guess what? You don't have to. Because once you get that first property, you live in it for like a few years, the equity rises, you can then borrow against that equity and get a different property, or you can sell it and get a different property, right? Like, once you get your foot in the door and you let some equity grow for a while, particularly when the people in the other units are paying the mortgage for you, then that gives you your stepping stone to wherever you want to live next. Okay, so Sam, thank you for that question. Second question comes from Arthur, and Arthur says, quote, I already have a substantial real estate portfolio, congratulations, and I want to know whether you have any guidance on maintaining a portfolio, such as the ideal debt to equity ratio depending on age, or when to sell, and whether and under what circumstances buying up is advisable. Thanks. Arthur, first of all, huge congratulations for having this real estate portfolio. And I love the question that you asked, because essentially your question is not, how do I buy my first rental property, which is what a lot of people, most of the students in our course are. They're looking for their first or second property. They are beginners and they're learning the ropes. But what you're trying to do is you're strategically thinking about, how do I start with the end in mind? Like, what are my objectives? And then how do I reverse engineer from those objectives to figure out how to use my current basket of assets in the most conducive way? Like, essentially you're asking a question about, how can I be a responsible capital allocator, right? And capital allocation is one of the most important skill sets that we can have, because when we have those assets, when we have capital, particularly in the form of different type, you've got liquid capital, I assume, as well as a lot of real estate equity. How do I best allocate that capital in order to serve my ultimate end goal? And the starting point with that is defining that ultimate end goal. So I notice here you ask ideal debt to equity ratio depending on age. And that's an interesting question to me, because when we talk about ideal debt to equity ratio, age is one of many influencing factors, but risk capacity, risk tolerance, and those are different. Risk capacity is logistical, risk tolerance is psychological. Age, timeline, and timeline is like conceptually distinct from age. They can be correlated, but they're not overlapping, right? All of those factors play into the ideal debt to equity ratio for you. One thing that I never want to do is be prescriptive. You see other people online who are, oh, thank you, best money class ever, thank you. You see other people online who have these prescriptive one-size-fits-all formulas where they say by age 30, you should have X saved for retirement. By age 40, you should have Y saved for retirement. By 50, you should have Z. Boo, don't like it, right? So if I were to simply prescribe by age 45, your debt to equity ratio should be in the range of X to Y, that kind of one-size-fits-all mass boilerplate would be, frankly, poor advice for you, poor guidance for you, because it would not take into account your own risk tolerance, risk capacity, goals, all of the personalized factors. And so what I think for your case, working through an investor policy statement, like really working through an investor policy statement, where you figure out what are you trying to achieve and what level of risk do you want to take on in order to achieve those goals. And do you want to bias your returns towards equity, towards cash flow? Do you want to bias your returns to be more, to have a higher value on present dollars? Or do you want to bias your returns such that you're placing greater value on future dollars at the cost of present dollars, right? Those are some of the questions that you'll ask yourself as you're figuring out which ways in which you want to bias your returns. And once you figure out how to bias your returns, that will answer all of the questions that you ask, like when to sell, whether and under what circumstances buying up is advisable. And when we talk about buying up, that could be consolidating your portfolio, right? Like, let's say that you have, I don't know your portfolio, let's say you have a bunch of single family homes and you're thinking about maybe selling 4 or 5 of your single family homes so that you can then put that money into buying a 8-plex or a 10-plex or a 12-plex, right? There's certainly many advantages to that. If you were to roll a bunch of single family homes into one small apartment building, now you've consolidated a lot of your overhead. You've got one piece of underlying land, because the underlying land is a non-performing asset from a income property perspective, right? The underlying land is overhead, underhead, I guess, it's underlying land, but what you actually monetize is the building, the depreciating structure itself, not the underlying land. The underlying land ideally grows in value over time, it gains equity over time, but it doesn't produce cash flow, right? So when you sell a bunch of single family homes, you consolidate your units onto one singular piece of underlying land, then you have one roof, you have one set of exterior to maintain, siding, windows, gutters, downspouts, termite pest control, like termite treatment, you have one to deal with. And so those are, and I'm sure you know this because you have a substantial real estate portfolio already, those are all of the benefits to that level of consolidation. But of course there are drawbacks as well. First and foremost being just doing that level of work is a lot of work, right? What else are you doing with your time? Like, where are you within your career right now? Are you at a point in your career where you both want to and have the capacity to spend that same amount of time? Let's say that time would be 60 hours. Would you want to spend 60 additional hours doing something related to your primary career that might capture a whole lot of additional value? These are all of the the questions that you'd have to ask yourself in order to work through whether or not a shift in strategy is right for you. That's why it can't ever be one size fits all. And that's why for you, the investor policy statement is so critical and so pivotal. So that's really the piece of what we do that I think you could get the most value from is the strategic big picture thinking. You know, like you have a portfolio, you don't need to learn about the how to, you know how to calculate cap rate, like got it, done, but the strategic big picture thinking is the most important piece. And it can feel the most nebulous, which is why having worksheets, having study groups, having structure, having an informed community of investors to kind of workshop that strategy through is a big piece of what will make that succeed. Cool. So thank you, Arthur. All right, final question, number 3 out of 3. Anonymous asks, my fears and concerns about real estate investing is that I'm a single parent worried about coming up with the money needed for the down payment. And even if I did, I don't make enough to cover the mortgage if I need to. So, first of all, thank you for sharing that. Like, thank you. I noticed that it's not a question. It's a statement about a fear. And to so openly know yourself and to know your fear, and to know your concerns, and then to express that takes courage. So first of all, I want to commend you for having the courage to make that statement, to state that that's your fear. That takes a lot right there. So then, to directly respond to that, this is precisely why taking the time to plan your numbers, to do it right, so to speak, to know how much you need to save for a down payment and how much you need to save for an emergency fund. I'm not talking a personal emergency fund. I'm talking an emergency fund specifically for your properties, a basket of cash reserves for your properties or for your first rental property, so that in the event that you have a prolonged vacancy, in the event that you have unexpected capex, unexpected big ticket items that a water heater breaks, right? In the event that those types of things happen, you have enough in your cash reserves to be able to get through it, right? That's why it's so critical. So in the world of poker, and I know this sounds like a tangent, but follow me for a moment. In the world of poker, there is this concept called expected value. And if you are making a decision that is a plus EV decision, means it has a positive expected value, that means that if you were to repeat that same decision 100 times, that decision done over 100 times is likely to have a net positive outcome. But in any one of those particular given instances, any random, 1 through 100 of those times, that decision might have a negative outcome, right? So that's the concept of EV. It's like, it's if you know that you are playing a hand in poker where over the long term you're likely to win, but in the short term you may or may not, you might or might not win this particular hand, but if you play this exact hand 100 times, then you would win more than you would lose. That's plus EV. Now, the thing though is that just because a decision is plus EV doesn't mean you should necessarily make it. Because the other thing to consider is a concept also in the world of poker referred to as risk of ruin. And risk of ruin refers to when the damage from a decision, even if it's a plus EV decision, when the damage from that decision is so severe that it knocks you out of the game, right? That's the thing that you never want, that's a risk you never want to expose yourself to. So rule number number one of investing is never make an investing decision that exposes you to so much risk that were you to realize that risk, like were that risk to come to fruition, it would knock you out of the game entirely. That's a long way of saying rule number one of investing is to stay alive. And so long as you stay alive, you can keep playing the game. And so to apply that to your specific fear, the way that you stay alive, the way that you stay in the game and you continue to be able to make those plus EV decisions is by having cash reserves, by having a strong emergency fund, by being conservative in the estimates that you make when you analyze a property, right? In the estimated rent that you think you can collect, in the estimated amount of time you think it'll take to rent that home, in the estimated amount of repairs and maintenance you think that home is going to demand of you, right? When you analyze the property, you always be very conservative in the estimates that you make. And this is one thing that we do in the course with the spreadsheet. Like we advise, we recommend that people have this range of, Roy Works, thank you so much for joining. Have a great weekend. We walk people through a range of possible outcomes. So you can see the worst case scenario, the best case scenario, and then all of the likely scenarios in between. So we walk people through what is a range of possible outcomes if you were to buy this home. And, how much money, not just for the down payment, but also for the cash reserves, for that initial upfront, how much realistically should you save? And sometimes, let's not forget the timeline. Like, rental property is not an overnight thing. Like, there's a timeline associated with it. And so it is within grasp. It's very much within grasp, but it's all about being very, very conscious and intentional about the emergency fund that you need and the analysis that you do and understanding that range of potential outcomes. Okay, so those are answers to 3 questions that come from people on the VIP list. If you are not on the VIP list, please sign up. It's free, affordanything.com/VIP list. And thank you so much for tuning in. Instagram, it's so good to see you. Again, have a great weekend. Happy Friday. And I will see you in the next one of these. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for being part of Afford Anything. You are so special to me. I'm so happy to see you here. Thank you so much. Chanel, thank you. Thank you. All right. Jonathan, thank you. Take care. Thank you so much. Phonefarious, what a great username. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Goodbye.